What is the most unhealthy thing you've seen a human do? There was a player at the casino who used to come in his mobility scooter, order Red Bull and vodka over and over, smoke unfiltered Camels, and play 3 video poker machines at a time for 36 to 48 hours. He weighed 380 at least, hated the entire world, and ordered food only from the fried chicken place. One day I went to wake him up and he was dead. So I'd go with that. I know his dopamine receptors were fried. This incident is literally the Futurama episode where Bender gets a human body and can't control how good things feel, so he overindulges until he kills himself as a fatty. Woo! This sounds like a guy I knew. But he was over 500 pounds and just gambled online. He was also a Vietnam vet with horrible PTSD. Also a literal virtuoso with an accordion of all things. Guy could listen to any song, really, any song, and then replicate it almost perfectly on the first attempt, if it was really fast or complicated, maybe second or third. He was absolutely broken by his time in the war. He was conscious of what he was doing to himself and just couldn't care. People are complicated. R.I.P. Dan. Saw a guy chase 6 energy drinks with a cigarette and call it breakfast while saying sleep is a scam. I'm convinced his organs have a group chat to plan their escape. 6 energy drinks. Just do Coke at this point. Coke is even less expensive at that point. Maybe even healthier. It would take what? A line of Coke to get the same results as 6 energy drinks. We need to test this hypothesis. One group chugs 6 energy drinks and a cigarette for breakfast, the other group does a line of Coke for breakfast each day. Check back in 10 years and see who's still alive. I'll be part of the control group. Turn off their oxygen tank so they could have a smoke. That's real dedication. At least they had the forethought to turn it off before lighting up. That's what I immediately thought too. Stupid, but not stupid enough to blow themselves up. Have a baby after a domestic violence incident thinking it would fix the situation. All that does is make everything worse. A bad relationship will only get worse after a baby, and I've never seen even one exception. Pour Mountain Dew into a baby bottle and hand it to their toddler. Straight to jail. When I worked at Starbucks, one that will stay with me was the day that a mom ordered a coffee-based frappuccino for her 2 years old and the sticker said personal cup and the personal cup was a sippy cup BC, she won't drink it otherwise. So why the fuck are you force-feeding your toddler frappuccino? I once saw a guy spraying spray paint in his mouth to get high. Normally when people do thus they would use some fabric to filter everything except the gas, but well he didn't and his mouth was sprayed in black paint. Would not recommend getting high like that either way. Witness me. I live, I die, I live again. I once watched someone with a food addiction shoving food into their mouth so fast they hadn't chewed what was already in there, and some fell out when they opened their mouth to take more bites. They started shoving the food in with their fingers and kind of compacting it so they could chew. They were also shaking the entire time they were doing it and snorting because they could barely breathe. It was horrific. Yes, we've all been to Golden Corral. People are making jokes, but I've seen someone in that situation and it really is disturbing. I worked retail in high school and we had to do an all-nighter for inventory. The manager had a bunch of KFC delivered for us. This one dude who worked there was a bigger guy but not freakishly big, but I later learned had a real food problem. He went to town on a bucket of fried chicken, shaking, sweat streaming down his temples, eyes on fire. It was like he'd gone feral or something. My dad smoked 4 to 10 packs of cigarettes a day, drank a 12-pack a day, ate a combination of sit-down and fast food at all times with beanie weenies as well, slept about 4 hours a night, and at one point was whoring around with, by his claims, 14 prostitutes. This went on for most of 30 years. He stopped the smoking and drinking after his second near-death experience. The prostitute situation kinda dwindled in the 2010s, he rotates between 3 or 4 women depending on who's pissed off at him. He also had recurring skin cancer for 23 years and spent 3 years in prison, which did blunt the drinking. He had a buddy supplying him cash for smokes though. He's dangerously close to living an average lifespan, which begs the question, just how long would this medical Highlander have lived if he didn't spend 30 years trying to kill himself? Oh, and he's extremely anti-weed. He fired his maid over what he thought was a weed vape, Google said it was a nicotine vape. 10 packs of cigarettes a day is wild. That's like smoking an entire cigarette every 7 minutes for 24 hours straight, lol. Must have been smoking 2 at a time. It would go that he'd have one lit, it might get left on his table, then he'd light one in the living room. When he'd step out to smoke when we did shows, he'd chain smoke an entire pack in one 45-minute to an hour session. Only time his lungs worked right seemed to be when he was hoovering the fuck out of the cancer sticks. I've had to tell people that chain smoking is not just colorful exaggeration, it's literally lighting a new cigarette with the end of the cigarette you are just finishing. When I was a teen, I was a drunk. I would often go days without eating. One time I blacked out, woke up at home, ran to my toilet and started puking. Little did I know when I opened my eyes I'd be met with dark black and brown coffee grounds. My toilet was filled, it was on the seat, everywhere. I had no recollection of my day. I continued to puke before cleaning up and going to bed. I continued to drink for 6 months after, continuing to puke coffee grounds occasionally. I never got checked. I mentioned it to my doc a few years later at 18 and he said I'd probably burned a hole in my esophagus that started a bleed into my stomach. Since the symptoms had stopped after I quit drinking, he didn't investigate further. I hope life is looking better for you these days. I'm not a drunk or an addict, and going off those standards alone I've accomplished the impossible, smiley face, much love. I've never even done drugs despite being a drunk. So, never done drugs and sober for well over 6 years. Parents are still junkies and unfortunately my siblings joined their ranks. Pour one out for my sister and brother. I was behind a person in a drive-thru once. She was in an SUV and it sagged on the driver's side. Half expected the suspension to break. She ordered a medium ranch dressing. The person taking the order was understandably confused, so the lady figured it would help to scream her order. Finally she said a medium drink cup filled with ranch dressing. She pulled over to the side after she got her food. I passed her on my way out, and she was taking a huge bite of her burger and drinking the ranch as a chaser. Like it was actually her beverage. I have not eaten ranch dressing to this day. This gave me a visceral reaction in my gut and soul. Thanks, I hate it. I was parked in a Walmart parking lot somewhere in the Fort Lauderdale area while eating some lunch on the way to the Florida Keys while on a road trip. I saw a guy that had just come out of the store walk into a brushy area about 15 feet wide between the parking lot and the main road. He took a can of compressed air out of his Walmart bag and huffed it until he got so dizzy he stumbled and fell over into a bush. I lost sight of him and was wondering if I should check on him or just call 911. About 5 minutes later he got up, looked around, pulled his Walmart vest out of the bag, then, presumably, went back to work. I worked at Starbucks in college. We had a morbidly obese woman come through the drive-thru every weekday morning. Her order? 26-shot white chocolate mocha with 11 pumps of syrup, whole milk, coat the inside of the cup with caramel sauce, whipped cream. I believe we calculated it to about 1,500 calories. Working at Spucks really solidified how caffeine and sugar addicted America is. This is not a far-off recipe for some regulars I've had. The craziest shit to me is the people that order 18 sugar-free sugar packets or 8 pumps of sugar-free syrup to everything they ingest and think they're really not fucking something up in their bodies. Just get the damn 2 to 4 pumps of regular syrup and be honest with yourself. I've told this story on here before, but here goes. I'm a retired paramedic and one night years ago we got a call for a 20-something-year-old with cardiac symptoms. Based on the area we worked, this generally means cocaine, crack-induced chest pain. We arrive at a terrible little SRO building and are directed up to the 2nd floor. Our patient is crawling towards us, and upon seeing us yells, "Get me a priest." My bullshit meter is ringing at full volume, but all the other residents are coming out to see what's happening, so we carry him down to the ambulance to evaluate him. I ask his medical history and he says a 5+ syllable word that I hadn't heard since medic school. Shit, I clearly remember thinking. We put him on the monitor and his in atrial fibrillation, not a good heart rhythm, not the worst, but weird for someone so young, at about 180 beats per minute, entirely too fucking fast. We get in 4, give a drug called amiodarone with a bunch of fluids, and dude perks back up pretty quickly. We ask him what he was doing when his symptoms started. This proved to be a mistake as it did incalculable psychic damage to my partner and I. He explains that he has been in and out of the hospital all week. The first time he went in was for the exact same thing. Upon discharge, he asked the doctor how to prevent this from happening again. The doctor gives a basic answer of don't do drugs, limit caffeine, no nicotine, drink plenty of water, light exercise, good diet, etc. Dude gets home and can only remember that the doctor said to drink lots of water. He downs almost 3 gallons of water before his salt levels are relatively so low that he calls 911 again. Upon discharge number 2, he asks the same doctor how to avoid this happening again. The doctor, who I'm sure was dumbfounded, tells him something along the lines of don't chug 3 gallons of water. Upon getting home, he remembers the doctor as having said not to drink water. 2 and change days later, we get the call because he has not had a drop of any fluid since his hospital discharge. We take him back to the same hospital for the 3rd time and the triaged nurse immediately sprints up to us asking what brings him in this time. She was impressed, but not surprised to learn why. Inject methamphetamine while saying vaccines are poison. I have a friend who only eats pepperoni pizza for every meal and drinks Diet Pepsi. Man has not had water in 10 years. A friend of mine took her husband to the hospital because he was screaming about a massive headache. She thought it was something serious due to how he was acting. The doctor said her husband is just really dehydrated and asked when was the last time he drank water. He said at least 2 years. He only drank Cokes. She was so mad at that hospital bill, lol. I will never understand this. For hours without water and I'm like SpongeBob the first time he went to Sandy's. Wouldn't say it's the worst thing I've seen, but a girl around 22 I worked with for about 2 years said she has only drank coffee and caffeinated drinks for a good 10 plus years, never drank water because she didn't like it for some reason. Complained often about having headaches, stomach pain, joint pain, overweight, eye issues, and various other issues. Kept on her for the duration of me working there, and towards the last 6 months of being there, I noticed she had a half-gallon water jug and asked her why the sudden change. Said she went to the doctor the other day and told me all of the things the doctor said to change. Namely quit caffeine and drink, eat healthier. By the time I left, she lost a good amount of weight and basically never complained about the issues said earlier. Another one I witnessed was from an ex-girlfriend. She had been drinking well over a 12-pack of Mountain Dew with minimal water a day for around 10 years. Doctor told her she was forming a hole in her stomach from the excess soda drinking. Never stopped her though. What I'm doing right now, staying in bed all day doom scrolling on Reddit. Setting a bag of pork rinds and a 2-liter bottle of Pepsi on the nightstand so her toddler kids wouldn't wake her up for food in the mornings. And lectured me about working, rather than collecting welfare and staying home with my teenaged kids after their dad died. In high school, a kid put paint thinner in an empty can of chewing tobacco and would huff it with the strength of 3 Kirby's. He was ripping at it for an hour straight for days in class, so who knows what that shit did. With the strength of 3 Kirby's, dear God, add that to the list of units. I had a patient once get an infection in a very small surgical wound that started out as 1 centimeter wide. Well, he knew something was wrong but didn't get it checked out until he couldn't lay on his back anymore. He had a flesh-eating bacteria called necrotizing fasciitis that ended up eating his skin from the middle of his thighs all the way up to his middle back. It was so bad that when he came into the hospital he was given about a 30% chance of surviving. I'll never forget that smell. I was in an alley in a rough area of town with some colleagues shooting a scene for a video project. I saw a man who was probably close to my age slowly work his way along the wall looking for and finding used drug needles. When he found one, he would inject it into his arm and push the plunger down, for what I assume was the last small amount of drugs that might be still in the vial. It was extremely hard to see. It's the saddest moment I've ever witnessed. Someone with such unmanaged diabetes that they have had 6+ surgeries removing toe after toe, chunk of foot after chunk of foot. She has stubs for feet now, no toes. And she continues to eat sweets and fast food. She's basically immobile now unless she has special shoes on and uses a walker, which she usually chooses not to use. She sleeps sitting up on her couch. Her adult children provide all of the sweets and food for her because she is her own person. If she wants it, she can have it. She had a quad bypass a year and a half ago, and multiple people brought her cookies and jams in the hospital. As a toddler, my grandmother babysat me every day while my parents worked. This was in the 90s. I wasn't given juice or milk, just regular Pepsi, all day every day. So I of course started having panic attacks at age 4.